So you've heard that you can grow your business by taking it global, but you're not quite sure where to begin. It's a big world out there, and no country, culture, community is exactly the same. But even small businesses can realize the benefits of selling in international markets if you have the right tools and the right guidance. I'm Ivana Taylor. I'm the publisher of DIYmarketers.com and the host of Bizapalooza Chat. And today, we're going to talk about how to take your local business global. My guest today is Diana Ballard. Diana is a consultant strategist advising on going global strategies. Welcome, Diana. So great to have you with us today.
Great to be here, Ivana. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Diana, let's talk a little bit about this global world of business. I mentioned to you that a lot of small business owners get the advice to go global or to sell internationally, in our case, out of the United States, because there's so much opportunity. But we think it's a little complicated because you don't know what you don't know. So can you maybe explain what is a global business, whether it's here in the United States or abroad?
For me, Ivana, a global business is one that is known and operates worldwide. And in my world, as a best practice, a global organization is one that should intentionally think about global first approaches to their business strategy, their development of their small business product or service offering, as an ongoing exercise in order to grow their business so that they can link those external market opportunities with their business growth and ROI. A global business is different to, let's say, an international company. An international company is one that perhaps is involved in some degree of international business, perhaps more than the home market. Perhaps they probably have experience of marketing, say, 2 or more additional markets. As a best practice, an international company does understand the market for its products and service, does have local insight and expertise, and has established perhaps some third-party or distributors or contacts locally in the market, and understands how their business might be impacted by, any cultural, regional, regulatory, legal, or other, including linguistic differences. So a global business is one that is consciously engaged and available to do business in other markets other than their home one.
So does that mean, let's see if I can get this right, does that mean that a global business has to be intentional? So just because you have an internet business and people can access your information online, you're not really a global business unless you're intentionally selling to them. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, any business has to have intentional marketing and business strategy, and that intention involves all of the usual best practices. And as an entrepreneur and small business owner, you will know that, you will understand the drivers that are by which you arrived at the success that you have today. So you would also therefore understand that exploring other markets requires that the same due diligence, but we are in an ever-connected world, and we are very close at hand to exploring those market opportunities right from your own desktop.
So you said that, I love this thing you said about thinking global first. That's almost like in our world, when you're designing a website, you think mobile first because most people are on the mobile device. So now you're saying think global first. If I were a small business in any country, what does that mean? Because I suspect that businesses in different countries seem to want to sell to the United States. And so it's almost like they absolutely default to thinking more globally. Whereas the United States, we tend to be a little more insular. So I don't know that we default to thinking globally. What would thinking globally first look like for like a regular Main Street business?
That's a great question, Ivana. I think thinking global first means small businesses should do their research upfront by checking out industry associations at home or international associations that will enable them to understand what's out there. Who are the local associations in various countries? Who can I reach out to understand if what I do has a market elsewhere? And through that research, using social media and online resources, as well as industry associations, you'll find a team on your side who will help you uncover the intelligence that you need to understand what it takes to succeed in another market in the same way or maybe more than you have in your home market. One of the great things about global first strategy is that the diversity of offering your services to more than one country will enrich your ongoing development of your product, service, and business, which will create more business value overall. So global first means think about the opportunity, research it, develop your network, and then ensure that you don't bolt on translational localization or market opportunities as a last thought or as an afterthought, because in my experience, if you do so, you potentially dilute or weaken the outcome. Perhaps you have delays in reaching markets, perhaps the translation that you might have has not been sourced with a reliable provider, so you end up with local messaging that isn't quite as impactful. The whole approach to going global requires a support system which you can easily acquire, and knowledge and expertise that will allow your message to resonate and engage with audiences around the world.
Are you saying then, Diana, let's say, for example, here in the United States, when you want to start a business, there are government organizations that can help you. We have the Small Business Association, we have SCORE, we have all these things. You said that there's a team to help you. And what I think I hear you saying is go out there and find those. There are similar resources everywhere.
And even your local business and industry associations may be able to point you in the direction of international or equivalent associations in other markets, and may even introduce you to partners locally. I'm sure that you won't be the first small business owner to ask those questions. And you may find international advisors on those business and industry associations whose job it is to help and guide you through that process. So that could be a great place to start.
Now, are there some businesses, or I should say, how can a small business decide if expanding globally is a good strategy?
Well, going global isn't for everyone. But since we're living in an ever-connected world, the world is literally at our fingertips, we can explore through social media and online and industry associations the market for our types of services, products and business models elsewhere in the world. So market intelligence is the way that you will discover whether what you do fits in with other markets. But of course, you have to be able to deliver your business and your service in those target markets. So you have to think about logistics. And in some cases, in some countries, there are certain regulatory and legal requirements which you'll need to check out to ensure that your service and business is compliant with those requirements. So again, it goes back to researching and finding people who will provide you with the insight that you need in order to make those choices. And of course, you have to be able to fulfill the service offering. So you may not be able to do that for some part or indeed all of your offering. You need to discover that.
Sounds like research is a really almost like 80% of the battle is what it's sounding like.
Yeah, whether it's reaching out to your international industry or local associations to provide insight or contacts, finding in-country professionals who know your industry through those associations or through online research, perhaps a potential distributor, a company or PR agency who can do the legwork for you in the native country and provide you guidance on market opportunities. Find out who the influencers are for your business in the local market. Perhaps the local agency or contact can help you there. Who can drive your brand recognition to get your name out there. Sometimes the channels and media that you use in your target market might be different. How can you make sure that you are engaging for meaningful sales conversations on the right channel? Again, local contacts, local insight will provide so that you're investing your money where you will receive most return. And then when you've done all of your research and you have a business case, start slowly, start gently, establish a test case in a specific market, elaborate what your intentional outcome should be, prove and measure the return on investment that you've made in terms of and what you'll get back from it. And then finally, I would suggest, really, you don't need necessarily to speak the foreign language, to speak the language of the target country. It's always fun to do that, to have that exchange and cultural insight. But you really do need a reliable language translation partner, someone who has a high level of fluency and linguistic communication capability in that target language, but who also understands your industry, who gets your business, and who's prepared to be trained and know the context of your value proposition and key features, so your message doesn't get lost in translation. But that translation that helps you to make sure that you maximize your business opportunities. So it's partly, Ivana, about insight, partly about finding your partnership network that will support you, knowing how to reach out on which channels, and then finding the right partner to make sure that your message is translated for maximum effect.
Wow, that is super, super complete. Now, I know that you have a lot of experience working with larger companies. What's been your experience with maybe different kinds of businesses and them being successful? I guess what I hear is what you started with. You said, be intentional, start with global first. I like what you said, start gently. That's very reassuring. Maybe what are some things that small businesses should look out for as they're doing some of these things? You have quite a bit of experience. And if somebody were to follow your process, what are some things they should be careful of as they push beyond their borders?
The good news is that small businesses have a unique advantage. I mean, we all think global opportunities are, the realms of larger companies, but larger companies face greater barriers because they have huge organizations that they're unifying into messaging to engage customers across markets. Small business owners and entrepreneurs have forged success through their personality, through their commitment and dedication, and that's what needs to be translated. So you don't have the siloed effect of larger companies in trying to maximize the opportunity. You can be agile, flexible, responsive. And we are, I guess, Ivana, in the era of personality. Through social media and online, we can be a forceful power to achieve our business objectives. So small businesses have every opportunity to being successful on a global stage. I think small businesses should focus on a couple of things to answer your question. Understand the opportunity for your business in the target market. You have to find a trusted local partner or resource or agency that will help you establish that, as well as doing your own research. In that journey, understand if there are any legal, regulatory, or other barriers that would prevent you entering that market. Now, understand the competitors out there through social media and online and elsewhere, Find out how they're presenting their services. Using Google Translate now, you can, if they don't already have an English translation of their web presence, you can easily find a rough translation which will give you an idea and a flavor for where your competitors are focusing on and where your unique opportunity might be. Clarify the unique selling point of your business, and by looking at the competitors, start to look at how that translates into the target market. Try that out on your partners in the country, whether it's an agency or local distributor or contact or translation company. Sound it out with them. Does it make sense? Does it resonate? Is it likely to engage customers potentially in the target market? And as a follow-on, do not think of translation as an afterthought. Bring translators as early as possible into your thought process. Provide them context, training, and be available for questions, because translators will also provide you insight into how your business and content will resonate in the local market, because they will be the ones who are really trying to translate your value proposition rather than the words themselves. The next piece of advice I would be open to adapt content and engage and change strategy to engage local audiences where required. Not all audiences and markets operate in the same way. So there may be a particular niche area where your products are particularly attractive, and understanding that you might have to alter the messaging. What works in an English context with an English audience might need to be transcreated, as they say, or created or copywritten in the target language to achieve that effect. Be open to translators if they have queries and doubts, so that your value proposition doesn't get lost in the translation. And then finally, the focus is delivering on promises. It's one thing to anticipate a market opportunity, but customers will be, ready for you to deliver on your promises. Are you ready to scale up production? Have you thought about shipping and logistics and delivery? Is your website ready for various currencies and transactions? Have you thought about legal and other requirements governing how you do business? So make sure all of that due diligence is, make sure that when you do have new customers, that you're able to serve their needs and create that great reputation that will bring you more business.
You talked a little bit about translation, and I'd like to do that, dig in a little bit more on this topic. You mentioned Google Translate, and I think a lot of small businesses feel that that's kind of like good enough. But here's my practical question. If you're thinking global first, and you're going to be translating copy and product descriptions and so on and so forth, I mean, are we even for a small business with a simple, let's just say that you have like a gift business, right? Like you do little creative something, little art pieces or jewelry or something like that, right? And let's pretend that you're not going to sell on Etsy, right? That you're going to have your own platform. And now I can see you're going to have how many languages are there, Diana, if you're going global? Does that mean that you have 180 different versions of your homepage? How does that work in practicality?
Not even the world's largest companies will localize into more than 40, 50 or 60 languages, Ivana. So yes, there are thousands of languages and dialects out there, but when it comes to the main languages of business and commerce, we can reduce and refine that down to far fewer. Let me be clear. Google Translate, in my opinion, is fine if you're doing research and you want to learn around a subject. But when it comes to expressing and translating your brand and the unique value proposition of what it is you do, you really need an expert translation service, someone who's familiar and available to not simply translate, but to localize your message, your content, your products and services, so they really resonate and they don't feel like a translation, but appear as if written in the target language in order to capture that sales opportunity.
Yeah, it has to speak to the culture, right?
It has to speak to the culture. It has to use the correct terminology and jargon. It has to appear to, to understand the industry from the target market's perspective.
Well, how do you go about finding such a service? I mean, okay, you can Google, but once again, how do you know that the people you're going to choose are going to be able to create content or translations the way you want them to?
Well, let's assume you've searched a couple of potential translation agencies that have good reputations, professional website with good references. How do you know? It's a great question. And we talked about starting slowly early on in this conversation, Ivana, and that also goes with translation too. My recommendation is that once you've established a relationship with a potential translation partner, is to test a piece of content from a service and a linguistic and quality perspective. Does it meet requirements, and how would you know if you don't speak that language? So
Right.
again, if you have the local contacts from industry associations or PR agencies or someone in country whom you can rely on to bounce this translation off and say, please read this. Is this in line with expectations? What are your suggestions? And provide that feedback back to the translator. So you have some independent assessment, let's say, and an independent opinion about translation quality. But how do you know? Well, you need to know that the translation agency that you're selecting are industry specialists. Do they know your business? Do they have other customers in similar businesses? Because this, if they do, will mean that they understand the terminology, the concepts, the style of language that is required to do a great translation. And depending on the type of content, are they familiar with marketing and PR? Do they offer an adaptation and transcreation rather than a simple translation? What do you want? And do they have the skills required in order to perform that as you would request? And then there are other things that come into play, but for a small business may not come to play immediately. But there are tools in translation that help translators improve their efficiency, productivity, make sure terminology and jargon is consistent across deliverables. And certainly most translation companies these days should use, they're called computer-assisted translation tools. This does not imply Google Translate, but it's an infrastructure, an environment through which translators can work efficiently, consistently, and make sure they're working to agreed checks and guides.
Oh, really great advice, Diana. I guess I'll just end this by saying, now I'm thinking that our audience is sort of thinking, hadn't thought about this before. I'd like to really think about this some more. Anything else you'd like to finish with? Because you've given us some outstanding advice.
And don't be afraid. You talked about you don't know what you don't know, but, exploring export markets and markets other than the home market can be an enormous source of joy as well as business revenue. It can expand your horizons. You can visit, engage, and create a more dynamic business model. And by the way, not all markets will flourish. We know that there's currency fluctuations, uncertainty across markets, but if you have your business operating in more than one territory, you can offset downturns in one market and one region by operating in other territories where there is growth. So you can develop a more robust business model moving forward.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. Diana, thank you very, very much for being here. Oh, one final question. Sorry. Are there some resources? You mentioned about research. Are there some resources that you might want to throw out there for people that they can check out, or books or anything that you feel might help people get their toe in the water?
Certainly, Ivana. I think I'm going to put out a few blogs with some recommended links and in the next days. So I'll be happy to provide that information.
Perfect. We'll be including those in the show notes. Thank you, Diana.
You're most welcome, Ivana.